I've opened up something special. I'm offering a complimentary coaching session, and I invite you to wisesquirrels.com/coaching right now before it fills up. Welcome to Wise Squirrels, the podcast for late diagnosed adults with ADHD. I'm your host, Dave Delaney. I've got a couple events I wanted to mention before kicking things off here. The first is tomorrow, actually, here in Nashville, Tennessee. I am hosting a Wise Squirrels meetup, and you can get those details over at wisesquirrels.com/events. Now, I want to do more of these meetups throughout the year, especially as I travel for speaking engagements and client work. So I'll be sure to update that page and let the Substack subscribers know first when I am hosting such events. Also, I've had several people request a webinar. So I will be doing a free to share everything I've learned so far along my own journey in order to help you along yours. And I will be sharing that in more details and how to sign up because space is limited and it's free. So visit wisesquirrels.com/events for those details as well. I know you'll get a lot from it. Today, I'm thrilled to be speaking with Diana Winston, the director of UCLA Mindful, the Mindfulness Education Center of the University of California at Los Angeles. She's the author of The Little Book of Being, Fully Present and Wide Awake. Called by the LA Times one of the nation's best-known teachers of mindfulness, she's taught mindfulness since 1993 in a variety of settings, including hospitals, universities, corporations, nonprofits, and schools in the U.S. and in Asia. And you can find her wonderful work on the UCLA Mindful Waking Up and Happier apps at dianawinston.com, or you can also find her at uclahealth.org/UCLA Mindful. Diana was kind enough to lead us on an actual meditation during the episode today. So make sure not to be driving while you're listening to that portion towards the end of the episode. We spoke a lot about mindfulness for people with ADHD, of course. Some of the topics I think will especially resonate with you include getting unstuck, overcoming trouble sleeping, and what to do about that. And also just on self-reflection and self-love, which of course are topics I speak a lot about in the Root Down presentation and training that I do for companies and conferences. So there's so many wonderful things that we cover, and Diana really is a joy. So I'm especially excited for you to hear her story about being a Buddhist nun in Burma in the 1980s, surrounded by scorpions, snakes, and really nasty mosquitoes. There's a lot to cover, and I'm excited to share this interview with you today. And of course, I wouldn't be doing this podcast without the support of both our awesome paid Substack subscribers. And I am so thankful to you for contributing a few dollars a month. Todd being our latest Substack subscriber. And I really do appreciate your generosity. Also, our sponsors. Wise Squirrels is sponsored by Inflow, the #1 science-based app to help you manage your ADHD. It's created by ADHD clinicians and psychologists. And their dedicated support system actually helps you understand your neurodivergent brain, teaches you to build lifelong skills, and also to get things done. I really am enjoying using the Inflow app, and I encourage you to give it a try for yourself. I like how it takes you through a process and walks you through the steps simply without overwhelming you with options within the app. It's nice how it's put together, and it's certainly designed for fellow Wise Squirrels. So I know you're going to get a lot out of that. Do yourself a favor and visit wisesquirrels.com/inflow now and try the free ADHD traits assessment for yourself. Give it a whirl. Let me know what you think of Inflow. I'm loving it, and I think you will too. And we thank Inflow for their support of Wise Squirrels. And now, Here's Diana Winston.
I'm the director of UCLA Mindful, which is the Mindfulness Education Center of UCLA Health. And I'm a longtime meditation teacher and trainer and have been in the field of mindfulness for about 35 years.
Yeah, it's amazing too. And you have a great app as well, which I use too. So, it's a free app, and folks can either they can come through your website and actually participate live virtually, or they can listen to recordings of your podcasts of your and you have talks, and then you also have like actual meditation practices and stuff. So it's
exactly. It's called UCLA Mindful.
Yeah. I highly recommend it. I'm trying to get my kids to use it too. Easier said than done. It's going to come from someone else, right? If it comes from me, then they're like,
exactly.
Whatever, Dad. So I wanted to start actually asking you, back in 1989, you are studying Buddhism as a nun, and correct me where I'm wrong here, for like a year in Burma. I would love to know sort of just quickly the backstory of what got you there. And then in addition to that, the story specifically, because I heard this somewhere, but I didn't hear how it ended. And you were spending your nights in a pretty rustic shack, basically sleeping, but you had mosquitoes buzzing around you and spiders and God knows what, snakes probably. I would love to hear like that, of how you got through that experience. But maybe before we do that, what led you to this, along this path?
Well, I did get started in 1989. I wasn't a Buddhist nun at that point. I was just a kind of like hippie chick traveling around India at the time. And I ended up in Dharamsala, which is where the Dalai Lama has the government in exile. And everybody was doing meditation, and there was a lot of Buddha. It was all Buddhist town essentially. And I was skeptical. I wasn't really that into it, but everyone was doing it. So I think there was a bit of peer pressure and curiosity on my part. And I ended up attending my first meditation retreat. And I remember even like sitting in the back of the retreat with a big bar of chocolate, like crinkle, crinkle, crinkle as I listened to it. But there was a moment where I heard something that was very, very powerful for me. And it was essentially, well, before that, I was a very driven person, kind of type A, like really wanting to be perfectionist, very successful. I mean, I was young. I was just through college, but the teacher was talking about how there's so much change in the world, and in the course of just our lives, we have pain, but then it turns into pleasure, but then it turns into pain. But then we have gain, we have loss, we have fame, we have disrepute, we have praise, we have blame, and that we're always running, seeking after the good thing, and running away from the other. And we're trying to control things that are uncontrollable. And I heard that and I was like, oh my gosh, this explains my life. Like I've been seeking the praise my whole life. And then she said, but there's a way out of this. And that is to have a mind of equanimity, a mind that's even-minded and balanced. And if I could find that mind, I could be okay with the ups and downs of life, whatever they were. And I couldn't control them, but what I could control was my own mind. And the way to do that was meditation. So that's when I started my practice. And I spent the next 10 years in and out of retreat centers and monasteries in the United States and in Asia. Went to Thailand and did practice. And then fast forward about 10 years was when I ended up in that monastery as a nun, which meant that I shaved my head and I gave away my possessions, which I didn't really do. I put them in storage. And I spent all day long meditating. So I was just in, walking meditation, sitting meditation, eating meditation. You don't eat after 12 noon. You're in silence. So I spent the year in silence doing this meditation practice that I'd been doing quite a bit up until then, but nothing with this sort of level of intensity that happened at that point. So that's all the lead up to the story that you were asking me about, about the mosquitoes. So I was what you're referring to is I'm living in this hut in the forest, and at this point I'm in Myanmar, Burma, right? I had a teacher I'd met over the 10 years in the United States. I had met a teacher from Burma who had invited me to come to his monastery and practice. And I was very inspired by that. Like, oh, how beautiful that would be to like practice in the way it had been done for thousands of years. So when I ended up there and I did this process of becoming a nun, like I said, shaving my head and stuff, and then starting this meditation of all day long. But what I didn't count on was what you mentioned, the snakes and the spiders and the scorpions. And I mean, these are big spiders, like big, like a dinner plate sized spider, and
oh my God.
Snakes that went on and on and on. And giant scorpion. You had to check your shoes all the time, make sure you didn't have scorpions or centipedes in it. So then there was a lot of, I mean, it was very hot for much of the year, and I didn't love the food, and I was getting sick a lot, and of course I was lonely, and I mean there was just a lot of hard stuff that happened. But I think the story you're referring to was that I was getting overwhelmed by mosquitoes. And so I remember this period of time where I'm like, I've got to figure out what to do about the mosquitoes. So I started designing mosquito traps, and but I did all these weird things. Like I would take this bucket of lake water and just put it in the center of my room and wait for the mosquitoes to land on it. And then I'd cover it up and I'd quickly move it out. And then I would plug up the holes, but then I couldn't, it was like a sauna. So that the holes in the walls because it had ventilation. And then my favorite was standing in front of the window and to the side at night with the light on outside and letting them fly out towards the light, towards me. And I would be like a toreador jumping out of the way, and they'd fly through, and that all worked. But what was happening was I was obviously spending all this time designing mosquito traps and not not meditating, essentially, which is what I was there for.
Right.
And so there became a moment where I realized that no matter how many mosquito traps I designed and no matter how many mosquitoes I got out of the room, there would always be another mosquito. And that was just the nature of life. And when I saw that, I thought, okay, back to the exact same theme from the very beginning. Instead of getting rid of the mosquitoes, I could create a mind that could be okay even in the midst of the mosquitoes. And that was what began to happen. Excuse me, what began to happen and what led to more ease and peace and opening up and understanding my experience. So that's the end of the story. The end of the story was basically I learned to live with the mosquitoes. But I will say this, different times of year, it got better. And I moved my hut at one point, so I was in a little bit more secluded place and there were less bugs there. So
yeah, that's good. That's great. Yeah, it's interesting because as you're describing, sort of there's always going to be more mosquitoes. I was thinking of like the problems that we have in our lives. And sometimes my mom is always, she just doesn't want any problems. And I'm always telling her like life is problems. It's about solving problems, because could you imagine a life without a problem? Right? Like that would be very boring. And AI hasn't solved all our problems yet. God willing, it doesn't, because who knows what will happen then. But then as you're explaining that, I'm like, well, that's kind of how I think about that. But then at the same time, there's nothing good about a mosquito. like they're like predators. They're like the worst thing in the world. So with malaria and so on. So fast forward to these days, tell us about like how you've been, because I know you've done some studies and work and you're doing research as well into mindfulness as far as it pertains to ADHD, and knowing the challenges that, generalizing, of course, but knowing the general challenges we have as late diagnosed adults or as people with ADHD, with, whether it's time blindness or rejection sensitive dysphoria or, all these other things that kind of come with it at different levels, perhaps. Talk a little bit about that. I already know from my own experiences of practicing meditation since 2020 and with some regularity and really finding great value in it. So I'm sort of seeding you there. But yeah, tell me a little bit about your thoughts about how ADHDers specifically can tap into the power of mindfulness.
Hey, this is Dr. George Sachs, co-founder of Inflow. a proud sponsor of Wise Squirrels. If you have ADHD, you know how tough it can be to stay on top of, well, mostly everything. That's why we created Inflow, an app designed by expert clinicians and people with ADHD to help you understand your brain, build habits that actually stick, and feel less alone in the process. Get the support you need with Inflow. Head to wisesquirrels.com/inflow to check it out.
Sure. And I'll tie it in a bit to my story after that period of time. So after I left the monastery, I was there for a year meditating, and there was a lot of like depth and beauty, and it was also really hard. And when I came back, but it was incredibly worth it. I mean, I don't recommend it to people these days because I'm like, there are places in the United States that's great, but if you're drawn to that, to being in that environment, go for it. When I came back to the U.S., I was trained as a meditation teacher by my teacher, Jack Cornfield. And so I went through this very small teacher training program, and then I started teaching within a Buddhist context, and then became very clear after a period of years that these teachings could be really beneficial to people no matter what their background, that they didn't necessarily, they could be taught in a secular way. And that's when I started connecting with UCLA, which now I've been working for them for like almost 20 years. But the first thing I did was I was hired for a study on the impact of mindfulness on ADHD. And so there was a postdoc who had some, grant funding for this. And we ran an 8-week program in mindfulness we did 2 for adolescents and adults. And we had great results. People were very, very impressed with it, and in both of the age groups. And what the main finding was that there's different, you probably know this from all your research you're doing, but there's different types of attention. And one type of attention is conflict attention. Conflict attention is when you're supposed to pay attention to one thing and you're being distracted by something else. And that's the hardest thing for people with ADHD, right? And what we found was significant improvement in conflict attention for people who've gone through this 8-week mindfulness program. I mean, so much so that the scientists looked at it and they said, "What medication did you put them on?" And we said, "No, meditation." Yeah. And so that was a kind of the first study I got involved with, and it was run by a woman named Lydia Zaleska, who you might want to have, maybe you've had.
She's been on that show.
Okay, great. So
she's great.
What we see is that, and then there's been, of course, many more studies since then. That was a long time ago, but there have been many studies looking at the impact of mindfulness on attention and how it helps to train attention. So it's like, we always tell kids, and we were told as kids, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention, but people don't tell you how to pay attention. And mindfulness in some way is a training in attention. And so the research now is showing that it can build attention, it can build concentration, it can also, so it can be helpful if you have ADHD. Right. And also it can be helpful like for being kinder to yourself, less self-judgmental, more compassion for yourself. And people tend to be very judgmental.
Yeah, and I find that the practice of metta, of love and kindness, has been very beneficial in the sense that, and I love it. For those who are not familiar, and maybe you can explain it actually better. I'm sure you can explain it better.
Yeah, it's a practice. So mindfulness is a practice of being in the present moment. We can talk more thoroughly about that. But loving kindness practice or metta practice is a practice it's a cultivation, and cultivates qualities of the heart, and it cultivates a feeling of kindness towards another or towards yourself. It's like you check into what's good about a person or what's good about yourself, and then you kind of wish for more happiness, more joy, more connection, more well-being. And it's a beautiful practice, and anybody can do it, and you can do it at any moment. I mean, you can do it through a meditation practice, or you can just have it. And most of us can feel it. Like if I were to just ask all of us who are listening right now, just to take a moment and think about someone you love, someone who makes you happy when you think of them. And it doesn't have to be a human. It could absolutely be a dog or cat or other animal. And just have a sense of them in front of you. Maybe imagine what you love about them. Imagine them doing something you love. And now you got that. Now notice what you're feeling in your body. Maybe there's like warmth, expandedness, spacious, smile to your lips. This is it. This is loving kindness. And so we felt I directed your attention there. And then what I would do if we continued on, I would teach you how to keep it going, right? And what gets in the way with it, we get to explore as well. So that's the practice.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, the way I've followed some guided meditations on this is, you start with someone, as you said, like someone close to you, someone that you love, and you wish them, health and happiness and so on. And then you picture someone in your life who you may not even know their name. And for some reason, it's the same guy at the grocery store that always pops into my head. Super nice guy, but I don't know his name. And I picture him or others. And then the third part, though, is yourself and projecting love and kindness on yourself. And I think that is something, especially with ADHD, when many of us have faced trauma in our lives growing up. We've had a lot of negativity, whether it's through teachers or bosses or whomever. It's important to remember to practice that on ourselves as well. And it almost feels sort of selfish in a sense to do that. But I think it's so important, especially with like self-doubt and imposter syndrome and all the things that, I mean, everybody experiences, but when you have ADHD, it's like adding gasoline to that fire.
Yeah, exactly. It's incredibly important, self-compassion. And there's a lot of practices that you can do to work on that.
And you didn't write anything about this in your book, which is awesome, by the way, which I have here.
Thank you.
The Little Book of Being, which is such a fantastic book. And it's something that I've kind of dabbled with, and I know it's not really in the wheelhouse, but what are your thoughts on manifestation?
I'm not a big fan of that sort of theory. I think it's pretty limited, and there's, things like The Secret, or like if you believe it, it'll come true. It doesn't seem to work. Life to me doesn't seem to work that way. And I don't think that's not how I tend to teach meditation or focus on it. But it's not to say that you can't have a vision and go for it and that it may come true. Like, I'm totally in favor of that.
Yeah.
What do you want in your life? Who do you want to be? What kind of people do you want? And then that's different than like, okay, if I meditate hard enough, I'm going to have $1 million or something.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I've just wondered about that too, because like, obviously, like I think of meta, right? Where it's almost like you're wishing happiness, you're wishing for this, but there's got to be a reason why we practice this. Like there's got to be some thought that this could occur because we're wishing it. And that's what makes me think sometimes about manifestation. Cause I'm not a like big manifestation type, but at the same time, you hear so much about it and you think like, well, why not like try to manifest, the success or life you want or what have you? Because in a way you're sort of, I'm not a religious person, but sort of like in a way you're sort of praying for it or hoping for something or wishing for something, just as you would with meta with kindness. I don't know.
Yeah. But if you notice the phrase, the way we say the phrases in the kindness practice, it's not like you will be happy, right? It's may you be happy. So it's kind of like sending out the wish, but being not attached to the results. We don't know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And it does transform us when we do it. And I hope it transforms other people. I mean, I'd like to assume that it's having an effect, but we don't actually know. Yeah.
Something I've learned over the years, when I had this terrible like phone sales job 1,000,000 years ago that was just hated it, and I was having a tough time with it. And then somebody told me to like smile when I was on the phone, even though I couldn't see the person, I would smile, and I did find it worked. And so like, what are your thoughts on the practice of any type of meditation, but doing so with a smile? Like I understand closing your eyes or looking slightly down and the different postures and or like a body scan or lying down or what have you. What are your thoughts about smiling when you meditate? I'm sure as a teacher it would be weird because everybody in the room would be smiling at you. But what are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting. There is this research study that had people put a pen in their mouth and And when they put the pen in their mouth, the corners of their mouth turned up. And then they tested them for mood. And there was some reporting of an elevation of mood when they were smiling with the pen in their mouth.
I think I've heard that. Yeah.
There is some science to it. I mean, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen master who passed away a few years ago, I mean, he used to say, breathing in, I calm the breath, breathing out, I smile. Like, it was a very big part of his teachings. And I don't teach it because I don't want things to get like too schmaltzy, too like, okay, everybody smile, but if it happens naturally, I'm all in favor of that. And I definitely want people to feel better. So.
Yeah. No, that's great. Tell us about the spectrum of awareness practice, this focused awareness practice, all the way to, go ahead. I'm already filling in the blanks because it's a great part of your book that I loved. And as I was reading about it and thinking about it, I actually made a note. And then as I read further on, I scratched off my note because you answered my question. But yeah, tell us about the spectrum of awareness.
Okay. Well, let me start by just defining mindfulness for your listeners who don't know what it is. I define it as paying attention to our present moment experiences with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to be with that experience. Mm-hmm. So it's really about learning how to be in the present moment, not lost in the past, lost in the future. Much of the time, if you were to check in your mind any time in the day, you'd notice you're lost in the past, replaying something. Why did I do that? Why did I say that? Feeling bad. Or you're into the future, planning, obsessing, worrying, going to the worst case scenario. And so mindfulness is this invitation to come back from all these ruminations into this present moment experience. And so it's typically trained through a meditation practice. And there are many ways of practicing mindfulness. And so the spectrum of awareness was my way of thinking about, in a comprehensive way, all the different ways to practice mindfulness. So we can practice mindfulness in a very focused way, all the way to a very wide open, spacious way. And the simplest way to understand that is to think about a camera. And this is important, for thinking about how attention works. Like we can attend to something that's right in front of us. We can attend to something that's open, like just sort of naturally, and then we can have peripheral awareness. So with a camera can take a telephoto lens photo, and it's looking very, you can put on that flower setting on your iPhone or something. You get like the really tiny little details, or you can take a regular photo, or you can take a panoramic lens photo. And so our mind can do that. And what I realized as I was working on this over time was that there are different meditation practices that correspond with these different ways of cultivating awareness. And they all cultivate awareness. They're just different ways to do it. And so one of the ways that people practice, and that's probably the most well-known, the most common, is to put your focus on your breathing. And you just focus on your breathing, and then your attention wanders away and you bring it back, and you keep doing that over and over. And that is a focused awareness practice. And it's a great way to practice because it, especially for people with ADD whose minds are all over the place, it trains you to come into the moment and to sort of harness that attention that's all over the place. But that's not the only way to do it. And also, what I will say is sometimes for people with ADD, a wide open, spacious practice might actually be better because it feels more in sync with how their mind is working. So that kind of practice would be more like relaxing and noticing all the many things happening and having sort of a spacious, easeful mind. And one of the ways that I'd like to think about it is, sometimes when you're out in nature and you just feel like present and connected and completely here. That's this quality of this far end of the spectrum I call the natural awareness quality, right? And so we can meditate in that way. And then I skipped over the whole middle, but there are ways that we can meditate to get more in touch with our emotions and be mindful of our emotions and our thoughts and our body sensations. And so the spectrum just increases our capacity to meditate aligned with the way awareness works.
So what are some ways, because a big focus of your book and your practice is around natural awareness, right? So
Mm-hmm.
tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, natural awareness is what I was referring to when I talk about the far end of the spectrum, where it's the more the panoramic lens on the camera, and
Mm,
it's when it's kind of like a more effortless meditation with the focus end of the camera or the camera of your meditation. You're working really hard to bring your attention back to the breath. With
yeah.
the more effortless end, it's a lot less work. There's more just a sense of resting in a place of well-being, of ease, of connection, spacious, wide open. These are some of the qualities that happen. And so this is what I call natural awareness. And I call it natural awareness, one, because it's inherent in all human beings. Like we all have that capacity. Just like I was saying, go out in nature and you can have a quality of natural awareness.
Mm,
And two, because it's not like artificial, it's real. Like it's right there, it's natural. So that can be practiced. I mean, generally, it's a little bit more advanced practice than for people who are just starting out. So normally with a student who's just starting out, we would start them with some focus practice. And that's because everybody, whether or not you have ADHD, everybody's mind is all over the place, right? Everybody has these busy, unfocused minds. So we want to teach them to how to kind of like corral your mind a little bit, but not in a aggressive way, and
yeah.
to come back to the moment, training it and building attention so the attention begins to get stronger and stabilizes. Once there's some stability in mind, then we can start doing a more relaxed practice where it's easier to get lost. It's easy, like when you're doing natural awareness practice, if you don't have any concentration or stability, you kind of can just like sit there thinking, and oh, I had a great meditation. I thought about the sushi I had last night, for half
Yeah.
an hour. So that's a little bit of it. And I teach natural awareness through what I call glimpse practices. They're
Yeah, they're
practices
great.
that give you just a little taste of it. And, we can play with that if you want.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I love the glimpse practices in the book. Like
Mm-hmm.
you've got a lot. I've shared this story before, but like during 2020, sort of when I started meditating with frequency and taking it seriously, and I quit drinking, and the world was imploding, and we had a
Mm.
tornado that knocked us out of our house for 3 months, and my
Oh
business
my
was
gosh.
it was just one thing after the other. And this is before I was diagnosed with ADHD on top of that.
Mm.
Uh, um, I was taking a walk. It was December, and I'm in Nashville, so I was taking a walk in a park, and and it was a nice day, but I was feeling kind of blue, and I saw these parents kind of frolicking around, playing with their kids in the leaves, and the kids were having a blast, and I was by myself, and it was making me feel worse. I was feeling like more and more depressed and sad, and I was feeling worse because I started picturing how my kids are now like older teenagers, and they don't want to do that with me anymore, but they did when they were little. And in that moment, after practicing for some time, I realized, well, first of all, I paused, and I questioned my emotions. I questioned like how I was thinking, and I
Mm.
realized in that moment of, instead of feeling depressed or sad, I should be feeling joy. And I should be feeling joy because these other parents and kids are experiencing this together, which I thought was amazing. And that I also had these experiences with my kids. Like I could feel sad if maybe I never took the advantage of going to this park with my kids, but I did. So we have those memories together. And as I started thinking about this, I started thinking like, no, like this is, I should be feeling happy. I should be feeling joy. Like, why am I accepting sadness
Mm.
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, then what happened?
Well, I carried on. Like I think now, like I've learned, the psychological term of reframing, right? Like of taking a negative thought and turning it around into not necessarily positive, but maybe questioning that thought. And I think because I was practicing and am practicing meditation and trying to be more mindful, I think in being more mindful of those negative thoughts and pausing long enough to question why I'm feeling this way, it allowed me to feel better and then carry on with the day.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wasn't like skipping and like la di da, I'm the happiest
Yeah.
person now. It wasn't that, but
Mhm.
it allowed me to kind of get past that negative moment and actually shift it into like a positive one.
Yeah. I mean, I think you did great. Like what you're saying and the way how you worked with it. Cause mindfulness isn't about like pretend positivity or something.
Right.
Mindfulness is being real with yourself. Like, what's happening in this moment? Well, I'm a little comparing myself to other parents, and I should, right? There's all this whole should storm happening. And so opening to that and just being like, okay, that's what's here. And what does that feel like? I often direct people to, what am I feeling in my body right now? My heart's racing, my stomach is clenched, my jaw is tight, whatever is happening, as we let ourselves have that experience with some kindness, with some compassion, and just presence, awareness. Sometimes it just starts to shift. And then, like like you said, it might not go away entirely, or it might not turn you into another person, but it gives you a little bit more freedom, a little more choice, so you're not at the mercy of, kind of your habits and your negative feelings about things. Yeah.
When somebody, especially with ADHD, and especially like entrepreneurs and creatives, which I tick those boxes together, and I work for myself by myself, which gets lonely as well, especially being an extroverted freak.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on getting unstuck? Like, I feel, and the more I speak with other ADHDers or wise squirrels, as I like to say, getting stuck seems to be a common thing, of like at a crossroads almost, and not knowing which direction to go. And instead of taking a direction for fear or whatever, just stopping there and just being stuck.
I guess from a mindfulness perspective, it's, first of all, I mean, having compassion for yourself and knowing that that's something that happens, right? So that the next time it happens, you don't beat yourself up and go, oh, here we go again, or what's wrong with me? I always have that. Like, we globalize, I'm always getting stuck. It's not true. It just comes and goes.
Yeah.
So partially it's about what kind of attitude we approach it. And then again, I would kind of encourage, like, what's happening when I'm stuck? What is that? What does it feel like? Oh, I feel heavy. My heart is clenched. I feel some grief or shame or something. Like, bringing that awareness and I have a technique I call enlisting the wisdom mind. When we have, and you're going to have run into it in cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever. It's like reframes. It's probably similar to reframes, but when we're having, a difficult experience, and we can be mindful of that experience, and we bring the experience down from being like a 10 to a 5, and we start to be like, okay, I'm feeling stuck, I'm feeling sad, then we can bring in our wisdom mind to help us. And our wisdom mind might say, hey, you'll get through this, or this too shall pass. Or it might ask you a question like, are you really always going to feel this way? Do we really know that? You're never going to become unstuck? Come on. Right. Yeah. So we invite in our wisdom mind to support us, but we need to have enough awareness that we're even doing the thing for the wisdom to emerge. Right.
Yeah. And it's called enlisting
the wisdom mind. It's just language that I use when I teach. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that in your book? I can't remember.
I don't know if it's in any of my books. I think it's newer, so it hasn't ended up in anything. Okay. It's in some articles, maybe. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah. I love it. I love it. Yeah, one of the things I've learned too is, and I think it was through Lydia Zaleska talking about the power of belly breathing. And I think because like I used to drink a fair amount and a beer so I have like a little beer belly, and I've always had my beer belly since I was probably a late teenager, probably. And exercise is challenging for me. I like accidental exercise where like I walk briskly to where I'm going, or I'm riding my bike everywhere or whatever. But like, going and actually doing things in a gym is challenging. But so I think about my belly, and especially when not even when I'm out in public now, it's like I'm always holding my belly in. Like I'm always sucking it in. And especially for me who, I'm being treated for anxiety and depression and things that I, dance around with as comorbidities. Thank you, ADHD. But I started feeling so much better when I started belly breathing and focusing on breathing with my belly, because it's not often I let it all hang out. Not that I'm some massive person, but it doesn't matter either way. Right. But just loosening the gut. What are your thoughts on that and on belly breathing?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a technique that I teach, although it's a good one. I mean, it can lead, I'm sure, to nervous system relaxation and sort of a like more kind of like release, relaxation. The thing I would say with you is, it sounds like the important piece, the belly breathing, helped you to be more accepting and kinder to yourself around your belly. And
Yeah.
that's like from a mindfulness perspective, okay, that's really cool, right? You're just, oh, I'm breathing deeper. I'm just letting it be what it is. It's not a big deal. It's just the way my body is. And that's great. I mean, that's, helpful.
What are some other techniques or exercises or practices that, folks like myself in our sort of ADHD kind of brains, mid-career, maybe stressed out about work and about life. And of course, in this day and age, I'm a Canadian citizen living in the States. Well, I'm an American too now. I'm Canarican, as Neil Young says, but my exit strategy is still that I'm Canadian. So that said, yeah, I mean, it's a stressful time for everybody, I think. What are some thoughts on that and ways to?
So, on just some mindfulness practices that people can implement. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
So, first of all, I think it's really helpful for people to have a daily practice. And it's not always easy to do, and especially when you're just listening to a podcast and someone says, get a daily practice. But if you're wanting to learn something and have it be part of your day and impact and affect your life, you want to do it on a regular basis. And so I like to start people out with 5 minutes a day. Everybody has time for 5 minutes. It doesn't matter. Like there's not a good excuse. We spend 50 minutes a day looking for our keys. We got to have 5 minutes a day for meditating. Yeah. And so my recommendation is to find a place that you won't be disturbed for 5 minutes. And it's helpful to listen to a recording. So there's all the apps. You mentioned our UCLA Mindful app. We have 5-minute meditations, 3 minutes, 10, lots of 30-minute meditations. But you can just listening and following along is really helpful when you're getting started. And then once you get the hang of it, you may choose to listen to more, or you may do it on your own. But all you're doing is cultivating this attention, right? Staying attentive to our breath or to the sounds as they come and go. And when your attention wanders, bring it back. And as I mentioned, that's the kind of like the starting place for this practice. So that's the first thing, is having a daily practice. Once you have a daily practice, and daily doesn't mean you have to do it every day. It could be that it's every few days, whatever, but just consistent practice. Then you can start to incorporate mindfulness into your day. And that might be making an activity mindful, like before you eat a meal, take a minute to reflect on the food, and then take a bite and chew it with your eyes closed and really taste every sensation that's happening in your mouth, and eat with mindfulness. Or brush your teeth with awareness, noticing the sensations of your hand moving, the sound, the flavors, the taste. So taking an activity in the day and making it a mindful activity is a way to bring some of this into our daily life. Also, you can just try to remember to be mindful. The tool that I like to teach is called STOP, and it stands for stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed. And it's really about, being mindful is not that hard, but remembering to be mindful is hard. So if we can stop, if we can remember the acronym STOP, then we stop, we take a breath, and, everyone can do it in this moment. You can stop, take a breath, and you can close your eyes or open them. If you're driving, don't close your eyes. And just taking a breath, and then observe what's happening right now in my body. What physical sensations do I notice? My stomach is clenched. I feel spacious. I'm a little sleepy, caffeinated. Maybe notice the sounds around you. And then proceed with awareness. And here we are. And it's just, I even did it longer than you need to. It could just be stop, take a breath, observe one thing. My heart's racing. Take a breath, proceed back into being here. And it's a beautiful little intervention that we can do at any moment. So it's really the formal practice that's complemented by an informal practice that brings mindfulness into our life. And especially when you have ADHD, anything you can do to bring it back into the present moment, I think is going to be really beneficial.
What about sleeping? Or do you have any tips around there? I know I found one of your meditations on assisting with sleep, because I think that is something people are challenged with. I'm, much to my wife's chagrin, she's the one that has the problem sleeping. I'm the one that's like, but I know a lot of people do have struggles with that. And I think I found one of your meditations on the Insight app as well for sleeping. I'm also a big Sam Harris fan, so I use his app quite a lot. Although I've been using his app since 2020, and I keep waiting for him to say, because he talks about consciousness so much that I keep thinking he's going to do the big reveal at some point that like we're all in a simulation or something. Like, surprise! Remember when I talked about AI in my TED talk?
That's too funny.
I love his work, but and I love your conversation with him too.
I have a course on there on waking up. Yeah,
and it's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, any tips around sleeping, especially for ADHDers?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's struggling with sleep, right? So we do have meditations on the UCLA Mindful app for sleep, and also Happier app. I have a bunch of sleep. There's a lot of sleep meditations on that. It's another one I'm connected with. But the basic principle is, so there are meditations that calm us and relax us. So that's a good one for helping you to fall asleep. And I do like a body scan where you just soften and relax your body go throughout your body until sometimes you fall asleep. Another aspect of using mindfulness for sleep is working with what happens to your mind when you get woken up. Because when people wake up, they can't sleep, they start to go into all sorts of anxiety and fear and replaying and grief and anger and all of the ruminations, and then it's a problem, right? That we get really stuck there. So learning to work with our minds, noticing, I'm lost in fear, or there's anxiety coming by. I'll give you an analogy. One of the analogies I like is that our minds are like trains, right? We have a thought and it leads to another thought, another thought, another thought. It's like we've gotten on this train and the train has left the station, and then maybe like 20 miles down the track, we realize we're on the train.
Yeah.
So with mindfulness, it's that moment of realizing you're on the train and then you get off the train. And so when you notice you're like in worry and grief and over, I'm on the train, coming back into the present moment, which could be my body, my breath, right here and now. And we can also start to learn to not get on the train in the first place, which is hard to do, but that's kind of where we're heading. So with sleep, having skills that you can do in the middle of the night, like, I'm on the train, coming back into my body, finding a place of ease and peace. And also, I like doing the kindness practice in the middle of the night when I can't sleep, because I find it very soothing.
Yeah, I love that too. Yeah. What are are there questions I haven't asked you, or questions you have for me about this? Because yeah, I mean, I'm just so happy to be speaking with you here in person, albeit virtually. But are there things that I'm missing when it comes to ADHD specifically, or because like one thing that a constant I hear about from others and for myself is, if you're late diagnosed with ADHD, you tend to start falling into this terrible trap of reflecting too much on the past, which, can lead to depression. And if you think too much of the future, that can lead to anxiety. And so this idea of mindfulness and being present and being in the now, I often tell people that what I've learned, one of the biggest lessons I've learned in this journey for myself is just to give myself grace and to understand that, like, why my operating system, as I like to say, right? Like why I get stuck or why things happen the way they do, but also that I wouldn't be living here in Nashville in this home, having these photos of my travels along the way with my wife, my best friend, and I wouldn't have gone to Ireland from Toronto to sober up in 98. and I wouldn't have met my wife there, and wouldn't have our two amazing kids and our very cute dog. And and even be speaking to you right now, probably, if it wasn't for the life that I've had despite undiagnosed ADHD. I don't know.
I mean, I'm hearing you talk and I'm thinking about self-acceptance, and the importance of really doing practices or an attitude of self-love, because it's beautiful the way you're reframing it right now. Like, you wouldn't be who you were if it weren't for your ADHD. I mean, I worked with a scientist who she was a researcher, Susan Smalley, who started our center, and she was always talking about the gifts within ADD, the incredible creative mind, the sharpness, the ability to hyperfocus when needed. She's just like, I think people get so down on themselves, and learning to be more self-compassionate and see exactly what you're pointing to, the gifts, is very, very powerful. And with meditation, when I teach meditation to people with ADD, I say, guess what? Your meditation is going to be even better than other people. I'll tell you why, because you have more opportunities to come back to the present moment than other people. Your mind's going to get stronger and stronger. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we can become hyper-focused on, much like this podcast, even like I've become hyper-focused on this topic and thus created the podcast and so forth. So I think, you could become, and maybe I have in a way become sort of hyper-focused on the topic of meditation and mindfulness, and not pretending I'm some guru. And I always say, like, I'm not a doctor, and nor do I play one on the internet. And I always include that caveat on the show. But yeah, I've just found this to be so rewarding, and your work has been especially helpful, I think, in my own sort of, and just trying to focus in the moment and not beat myself up all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if there's one thing I would do is I would offer a little meditation for people.
I would love that.
I would think that would be maybe the most illustrative of everything we've been talking about.
Yeah.
But my question to you is, there's a lot I could do. We talked about so many different things. So what would you prefer? We could do something around kindness. We could do something around getting really grounded and centered. We could do a basic breath meditation that I described. I could go anywhere.
What was the new one that you mentioned that you were talking about? Maybe we could go through that, because that was helpful. You said something, or not, like something that, and now, my working memory, dang it. But let's, let's, maybe something for grounding and for dealing with stress and trying to return from the abyss.
All right. So what I'm going to do is a practice I call resourcing. And what it is it helps us to connect with a place inside us that feels like grounded and centered and nurtured, even when everything going around us is pretty intense. Okay.
Yeah.
So just invite you to, wherever you are, if you can close your eyes, and that's helpful. You don't have to close your eyes. You can leave them open, but keep them downward so you're not too distracted unless you're driving. So just begin by taking a breath or two. And then notice your feet on the ground, and just feel the feet as they touch the ground, and notice their sensations of heaviness and hardness, softness, warmth, coolness. And imagine that you can sense the ground beneath your feet. So have a sense of the earth below you, really just holding you. And you might also notice, if you're sitting on a chair, the back of your legs touching the chair, and the earth is holding us up. And the earth is, for some of us, can feel very nourishing, strong, powerful. And if you want to change the image, you might change it into a mountain. So imagine that we are standing on a mountain, or that we are within a mountain. Can you feel the solidity and the dignity, the power? Taking a breath, softening and relaxing. Some people like the image of a tree, that we're standing with our roots going deep, deep into the ground. And maybe the tree has more give to it, more movement, in the wind. So as I say these different images, just see what speaks to you, like what is helpful as I sense into that. And this is not really mindfulness per se, but it's using our awareness as we play with images. We're working with this. So one more might be an ocean, a vast ocean where the surface might be very turbulent. Our lives may be turbulent, but if you imagine going deep, deep under the ocean, there is a profound stillness and settledness, and we can connect with that. Or maybe the sky, open, spacious, boundless. So of those many different metaphors I gave you, which one spoke to you? And just go back to that for the last, 30 seconds. Earth, mountain, tree, sky, ocean. And just rest here. And breathe. And settle. And notice how you feel. How do you feel? Do you feel more grounded, more solid, more present? And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes or end the meditation.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This has been great. How can folks get a hold of you and learn more about the work that you're doing?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of ways. You can find me through UCLA Mindful, and our website. I guess you'll link to show notes and stuff with their website. Yep. And then I'm also my own site, dianawinston.com. And we have my app, UCLA Mindful, and we've mentioned the other apps that I'm part of. And I have some books, Little Book of Being, and also Fully Present, that I co-wrote with that scientist I mentioned, Sue Smalley. So those are sort of the main ways right now to reach me.
Yeah. And I'll obviously, it goes without saying, I encourage everybody to do that. So yeah, thank you. This has been incredible.
Oh, well, so good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for tuning in to Wise Squirrels. Please make sure you follow the show so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed the show, leave a review, please, and visit wisesquirrels.com/love for bonus content, audio comments that you can leave, membership information, free coaching, sponsorship details, booking information, and much more. Drop by wisesquirrels.com/love. Check out the link in the episode description below and explore now. Thanks again for listening.